1-for-1 trade. Every single dissident who wants to fly the American flag and believes in American freedom, for all of the Americans who spit on the American flag and see it as a symbol of repression and evil. Willing to make that trade right now.
Is it going to be a deal?
Is there a deal?
The deal could be done.
It's a deal.
That means it's a deal.
The American left has had a tough time condemning what's been going on in Cuba. This has been true for decades. And the American left has always had a bit of a soft spot for Cuba. It's just an experimental regime. You see American leftists on college campuses wearing T-shirts of Che Guevara, who, as I mentioned, is a mass murderer and an evil piece of human scum. I was honored to meet one of the men who helped capture him just last month here in Florida. It was a pretty amazing experience over at a museum for the brigade that fought in the Bay of Pigs. It is amazing, the contrast between the Cuban protesters and the Americans who don't like the American flag. So this just struck me forcibly last night. One of the videos that was coming out of Cuba was protesters, and you'll notice that one of the flags that they are carrying around is the American flag. You can see it in this photo. There they are carrying around the American flag. And this is not a shock. Okay, this is it. They're shouting Libertad de Cuba. They're talking about freedom, and they're carrying around American flags. Because everywhere on earth that you go where you find people who want freedom, they are not carrying the flag of the Russians or the Chinese or the Swedes or the Brits or the French or the Germans. They are carrying the American flag, and it is not true merely in Cuba. It is true in places like Hong Kong. There's footage from Hong Kong. You'll remember just before the Chinese crushed the Hong Kong dissident movement. You'll recall that there were members of the Hong Kong dissident movement, and they were carrying the American flag. That is not a shock. Again, the rule is that if you are a dissident who seeks freedom, America is your beacon. The American flag is your symbol. Again, here's the footage from just about a year ago when Hong Kong dissidents were marching in the streets carrying the American flag. There is a reason they are pushing the American flag. There's a reason they're flying the American flag. Again, no other country has its flag flown as a symbol of freedom around the planet. None. Zero, zip, zilch. Again, from Cuba to Hong Kong, wherever communist tyranny reigns, those who stand up to it carry the American flag. Not just communist tyranny, by the way. In Iran, when you have dissidents who are standing up to Islamic dictatorship, you will see that protesters, dissidents, refuse to step on the American flag. Right? This is an amazing video from just a couple of years ago where dissidents were protesting against the Iranian regime, and they were stepping around the American flag. The Iranian regime had painted the American flag on the pavement, and the dissidents, instead of disrespecting and walking on the American flag, decided to walk around the American flag to demonstrate that they were not anti-America, they were actually pro-America. I mean, that's amazing stuff right there. Okay, the contrast between that and the number of Americans who hate and spit on the American flag is truly astonishing. And so I have a proposal. 1-for-1 trade. Every single dissident who wants to fly the American flag and believes in American freedom, for all of the Americans who spit on the American flag and see it as a symbol of repression and evil. How about that? Willing to make that trade right now. Now, in reality, American citizens can't be expelled simply because they don't like the flag, because we do have freedom of speech. But in principle, the folks who are marching in Cuba for liberty right now and flying the American flag are better Americans than the Americans who stand around spitting on the American flag and pretending that it is a symbol of repression and evil. You know who those people are? People who have never lived under true repression and evil. Seriously. If you live under the threat of true repression and evil, the American flag is the symbol of liberty. If you live in America, a place of liberty, we have this ungrateful, rather despicable distaste for our own freedom. We've gotten so used to being fat and lazy and rich and free that we seem to forget that there are people all over the planet who live like that, and that for most of human history, none of that was the rule. And when you see the contrast between people in Cuba who are risking life and limb, I mean, the security services are shooting people right now. There's video that was emerging from Cuba yesterday of the police in Cuba gunning down, like firing live ammunition, according to these videos, at dissidents, at protesters. You can see some of the video.
No te pongas de falta de respeto.
Sí.
Cuidadito.
Oye, dispara, tira aquí en el pecho, mira, en el pecho, en el pecho, en el pecho.
You can see people being arrested, people being shot at.
No te dando manotazo, que lo que es. ¿Qué te he hecho? ¿Qué te he hecho? ¿Qué te he hecho, cojones? No, ¿qué te he hecho? Tira, tira, cojones, tira, tira.
And it's wonderful stuff happening over there. When you see that sort of activity by actual repressive regimes, and then you have the United States, the left of the United States, mainstream, going completely silent on it while spitting on the American flag, it does tell you something, because they have been completely silent on it. The left simply has nothing to say about the liberty of people in Cuba. And by the way, the people who are protesting in Cuba would not, I met with many of them. Many of them would not identify as right-wing American Republicans. They would not. Many of them would identify, I'm sure, as Democrats. They believe in large social services. They're not people who nationally, who oppose naturally, for example, nationalized healthcare. They might like nationalized healthcare, but what they understand on a root level is that a government that represses its people and abolishes private property and cuts against profit motive and decides that human beings ought not have rights that pre-exist government will inevitably slip into tyranny. That they understand at a gut level. And meanwhile, you have, again, the sickening specter of Americans kneeling for the American flag while living in the richest and freest country in the history of the world. I promise you, Colin Kaepernick would not trade places with any one of these Cuban dissidents. I promise you, Ilhan Omar would not be trading places with any one of the people living in Hong Kong right now. None of these people ever are willing to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to ripping the United States and talking about how evil it is. None of these folks actually believe that the United States, I really doubt the sincerity of many of these folks, or if I don't doubt their sincerity, I doubt their knowledge level. There's a tremendous level of ignorance. If you never look outside the borders of the United States, it's very easy to identify the problems of the United States. If you ever look for 5 seconds outside the border of the United States or beyond the time period of today, what you will see is that the vast majority of history and today in the vast majority of countries, the kind of liberties that we expect, that we demand from our government are not available to the vast majority of people, which is why those people march with our flag while we here in the United States are giving millions of dollars to athletes who disdain the American flag. And yes, flags stand for something. You know who knows that? The people who are marching with our flag in Cuba right now at risk to their own life and limb. Did you know that every single like creates one additional leftist tier? That is just science.